Chapter 2. Detail questions. 1. Art history. Listen to a lecture in an art history class. Fill in the diagram with the information that you hear.
Today we're going to talk about the time in American history when photographs were first used to document an era. I'm talking about the Great Depression. The Great Depression had a major effect on the development of photography. I mean, if you look at pictures of people before this time, what do you see? Emotionless portraits of people dressed in their best clothes, staring directly at the camera. That all changed during the Depression. Before we begin, let's highlight some key points. The Great Depression was the period of massive unemployment from 1929 to around World War II, which was for the U.S. around 1941. All America was affected, but rural people were the hardest hit. At the same time the Depression was happening, farmers in the West were getting hit by a bunch of terrible dust storms that destroyed their crops. Many were forced to sell everything they had and migrate to California to start a new life. So that's that. And how did this era affect photography? Well, one important change was that the government began to get directly involved in art. See, at the time, the government was trying to create programs that would help farmers. A government program called the Farm Security Administration began to hire photographers to take pictures of what was happening across the nation. Many photographers decided to take pictures of the migrants as they traveled to California. Also, for the first time, we see photographers taking pictures of people wearing normal clothes and experiencing emotions. In other words, we start seeing photos of real people going through real situations. These photos of homeless migrants gave the rest of the nation a glimpse into the difficulties they faced during their arduous journey to California. The photos would go on to become a lasting icon of the Depression. Let me give you an example. Let's see if I can get Dorothea Lange's famous photo entitled Migrant Mother up on the overhead. There it is. As you can see, the photo shows a migrant mother and her 2 children on their journey from their farm to California. Her children lean on her for support as she looks at a point-off camera. Notice how her ragged appearance and simple dress give this photo a strong sense of realism. The anxiety about her family is written all over her face. She is a perfect representation of the despair migrant farmers felt as they faced a troubled and uncertain future. Okay, touching photo, but what did it and thousands of others like it really do? They alerted Americans to the harsh reality people like this woman underwent daily during the Depression. Never before had photography been able to depict the reality of people and events as well as in these photos. Americans from all over the nation could identify with these people through photographs, initiating support for programs that would provide aid to farmers. These photographs would act as a model for documentary photographs produced in future generations.
1. According to the professor, how were photographs taken during the Great Depression different from earlier photographs? 2. Why did the government program hire photographers? 3. According to the professor, who is Dorothea Lange? 2. Business. Listen to a lecture in a business class. Fill in the diagram with the information that you hear.
Okay, students. Yesterday we started to talk about conflict in organizations. Organizational conflicts happen all the time in business and often disrupt employee satisfaction and workflow. So if we're managing a business and we encounter a conflict, what would our natural tendency be? Either suppress the conflict or try to solve it, right? After all, isn't conflict a bad thing? Well, it depends on what viewpoint you take. Today, we're going to discuss the opposing viewpoints of Frederick Taylor's traditional view of conflict versus the interactionist view of conflict proposed by Stephen P. Robbins. In order to understand Taylor's views, we need to take a closer look at his contribution to scientific management. In the late 19th century, Frederick Taylor began searching for ways to make workers more productive. He began to break job tasks down into their components and spent his time measuring how long it would take for a worker to complete each part. He then set specific standards for performing each job. He called his method scientific management. Under his system, workers who were fast and efficient got paid more money, while workers who were slower and could not meet his standards were paid less or laid off. In other words, managers could get rid of slow workers until the workforce consisted of the best, most productive workers. Of course, by making his workers follow a set standard of production, he regarded them as little more than emotionless robots that could all produce at the same rate. So, how does this relate to organizational conflict? When Taylor first applied scientific management to a company in 1893, he was able to get 35 people to do the work once performed by 120. Wages were increased for those workers by 80 to 100%. He thought his theory was a success and decided to apply it to conflict management. Taylor was so confident in scientific management that he believed managers who applied his technique correctly could eliminate all conflict in the workplace. See, Taylor thought that conflict in organizations was always harmful because it hindered productivity. He believed that organizational conflict was unnecessary and could be avoided. However, as time passed, views of conflict began to change. During the 1970s, a man named Stephen P. Robbins suggested an alternative position toward conflict called the interactionist view. The interactionist view states that conflict is not only unavoidable, but necessary for an organization to function properly. Like Taylor, Robbins did acknowledge that conflict could be harmful to an organization. Yet Robbins also felt that some conflicts actually result in the search for new ideas and solutions. Therefore, a certain level of conflict was desirable for a company to expand. Robbins believed the best way for managers to handle conflict was to manage it in such a way as to reduce its harmful features and increase its beneficial features. This would raise production to its highest possible level. As you can see, Robbins' interactionist view differs greatly from Taylor's traditional approach.
1. According to Taylor, how does the proper use of scientific management affect conflict? Two. What did interactionists like Robbins think about organizational conflict? 3. According to Robbins' theory, what can be a positive result of conflict? Choose two answers. Three. Office hours. Listen to a conversation between a student and a professor. Fill in the diagram with the information that you hear.
Professor Johnson, can I talk to you for a minute?
Of course, Sam. What can I do for you?
Well, I just finished reading your newest book about how to write about the natural world, and I thought it was great.
I'm glad you liked it.
You know, before I picked up your book, I never thought of nature writing as a specific genre.
Not many people do. But really, learning how to describe the natural world is important to all forms of writing. In my book, I stress that nature writing almost exclusively depends on using your 5 senses of sight, hearing, smell, touch, and taste. The whole purpose of nature writing, after all, is to paint a picture of the world around you. If you think about it, creative writing professors teach their students the same things concerning imagery.
That may be true, But most of my friends in creative writing say that one of their big problems is that they don't use enough descriptions in their works.
That's not surprising. Many writing students have trouble because it's hard to put the description of the world around you into words.
I always had trouble with using imagery in my writing until I read your book. After doing some of the exercises you suggested, I feel like my writing has improved some.
That's wonderful. I think that if writing students practiced writing about the natural world around them, they'd find it much easier to put images into writing.
That's one of the reasons I thought I'd talk to you. Since I know this is the time when you professors have to start planning what classes you want to teach next term, I wanted you to consider forming a class on nature writing. We could use the book you wrote as the class textbook.
I'm flattered that you think my book would be good enough to form a class around.
And it would be great to get writing students to appreciate the natural world. I mean, we're usually zooming through our lives so quickly that we don't have time to actually stop and look at the world around us.
You have a point there, but do you really think there would be an interest?
Absolutely. I think it would be popular even with students who aren't studying writing. No other class at the university teaches about nature writing. It would be a hit.
I'm glad you think so. Unfortunately, the department here doesn't. I suggested teaching a class on nature writing over 2 semesters ago, but the department head didn't believe it would be popular with students.
Are you kidding? I know tons of people who would want to sign up for it.
I'll tell you what, if you think you could get 30 people to send letters to the department head expressing support for a nature writing course, it might convince him to approve one.
Okay. I'll make an announcement about the course in my creative writing class and try to get students to write those letters.
1. What is a problem that creative writers have, according to the student? 2. Why hasn't the professor been able to teach a nature writing class? 3. What does the professor suggest the student do to have the class offered? 4. Service encounter. Listen to a conversation between a student and a university employee. Fill in the diagram with the information that you hear.
Hi, may I help you?
Hi, I'm here to ask about meal plans.
Sure, what are you looking for?
Well, I'm thinking that I should probably change my meal plan.
Okay, what meal plan are you on right now?
The 20 meals a week one. But I'd definitely like to get something smaller since I'm always missing my meals, and I end up wasting lots of money.
Well, we have the 14 meals a week, the 10 meals a week, and the 7 meals a week plans available.
How much are those compared to the $3,000 that I'm paying for the 20-meal plan?
Let me look this up. Okay, so it's $2,700 per year for the 14, $2,500 for the 10, and $2,400 for the 7. I'm sure you can see that the 20 meal plan is the best deal.
Well, considering that I really only average about 10 meals a week with my hectic schedule, I'm going to get that one.
Okay, so you'd like to downgrade to 10 meals a week? I can arrange that for you. Let me put it into the system. Done.
That was quick.
Yep. Anything else I can do for you today?
Well, yeah, actually. I'm still concerned about the meals that have been wasted, and I'm sure will still be wasted, even with the new meal plan, just because of the way my schedule varies and changes unexpectedly. I mean, what if one week I only manage to make it to 3 meals, and the following week I find that I actually want 14? I just wish that there was another system that was more flexible.
Okay, I understand your dilemma. You know, you could actually go off of a meal plan entirely and purchase something called meal points, which you can use at the various establishments to buy snack foods and even to buy individual meals at the dining facility.
Really? I can do that?
Sure. And also, when you purchase meal points, you'll be buying $1 for 80 cents.
Huh? What does that mean?
Let's say you'd like to buy $100 worth of meal points. Remember, you can use them to buy practically any kind of food you like around campus. You'll get them for $80.
So it's like getting a 20% discount. Not bad.
This way you won't have to feel like you're wasting any of your meals.
That's a relief.
1. Which of the following is true of the student's initial meal plan? Two. Why does the student want to change his meal plan? 3. According to the discussion, what are meal points? Five. Astronomy. Listen to a discussion in an astronomy class. Fill in the diagram with the information that you hear.
Okay. Many of you had questions about Earth's earliest atmosphere. So, to answer those questions, let's start at the beginning. During the first phase, the very first gases that existed in the Earth's atmosphere were hydrogen, helium, and hydrogen-rich gases from when the planet was formed from the remains of a star. Now, these gases are really light, and the solar wind, or fast-moving streams of particles from the sun, were able to blow these gases out into space easily. So the first gases in Earth's atmosphere escaped, and the Earth had no atmosphere for a while. Then Earth underwent a lot of geologic activity. Inside the Earth's hot interior, heavy metals were sinking toward the center, while lighter materials like rock rose toward the surface. Well, let me clarify. The events happening inside Earth's interior caused a lot of volcanic activity on the surface. We had volcanoes exploding constantly. Now, all this volcanic activity released a lot of gases into the air in a process called outgassing. Okay, you all get that? Outgassing. That's the second step. Now, most of the gases released by these volcanoes were steam or water vapor, carbon dioxide, and nitrogen, so our early atmosphere was composed chiefly of these three gases. So does anybody know what Earth's early atmosphere was like?
Well, the Earth would have been extremely hot, and since there was no water or oxygen, there wouldn't be any life. And I think I remember hearing that the atmosphere was denser than it is today.
Absolutely. Hot, dense, devoid of life. As in no living things at all. Think of the carbon dioxide-rich atmospheres of Venus or Mars, and you'll get a good idea of what early Earth may have been like. Well, the next major thing that happened was water formation. So, Debbie, how was water able to form?
Well, you said much of the Earth's atmosphere was water vapor, so I guess the Earth eventually cooled down enough for water to form.
Yes. Once the atmosphere cooled, the water vapor in the atmosphere began to condense and create precipitation. This is how our oceans were formed. Much of Earth's carbon dioxide was dissolved in Earth's oceans, leaving an atmosphere rich in nitrogen and with less carbon dioxide and water vapor. Water acted as a catalyst for life. Once water was created, the final major step was able to occur. About 3.5 billion years ago, life began to develop in the form of unicellular bacteria. This was followed by more complex organisms, most notably photosynthetic blue-green algae. And this is where things really got interesting. Photosynthesis, you'll remember, is how organisms like plants and algae are able to convert carbon dioxide into energy. As most of you probably know, one product of photosynthesis is oxygen. The algae absorbed much of the carbon dioxide and released oxygen into our atmosphere. As plants continued to evolve, more and more oxygen was released into the atmosphere until our atmosphere transitioned from a carbon dioxide-dominant atmosphere to its current state as an oxygen-rich atmosphere.
1. According to the professor, what caused hydrogen and helium to escape from Earth's atmosphere? 2. After the process of outgassing, which gases made up most of Earth's atmosphere? Choose 2 answers. Three. What does the professor say caused life to form? Six. Zoology. Listen to a lecture in a zoology class. Fill in the diagram with the information that you hear.
Okay, everyone, listen up. We're going to conclude this week's lecture series by talking about 2 apes that are very similar to one another. I'm talking about our close cousins, gorillas and chimpanzees. I'm sure most of you recognize that outside of their respective sizes, gorillas and chimpanzees are very similar physically. But what about socially? In fact, there are some notable differences in the social structure of these 2 primates that I would like to spend some time going over. First, let's talk about similarities. You should note that gorillas and chimpanzees share almost the exact same DNA as humans. Gorillas and humans share approximately 97 to 98% of the same DNA, while chimpanzees and humans have approximately 98 to 99% in common. Evolutionally, this not only makes gorillas and chimps closely related to us, but to each other as well. So obviously, they're going to share lots of similar characteristics, right? For example, both gorillas and chimps walk on their knuckles and tend to form groups. Each of these groups consists of a dominant male that acts as the group leader. But here we start to run into some differences in group structure that work to differentiate the 2 primates. You see, gorillas are much more solitary than chimpanzees. Yes, they do form groups, but these gorilla groups are much smaller than chimpanzee groups. A gorilla group usually consists of about a dozen individuals, a male gorilla, several adult females, and their young. Sometimes the group may include a few younger males, but they rarely mate with any of the females. The females belong to the dominant male. Chimps, on the other hand, live in large groups of 50 or more individuals, sort of like a mini society. And unlike gorillas, many chimps in the group may be male. This large group consists of several smaller subgroups, another characteristic that is not seen with gorillas. These chimpanzee subgroups often consist of a mother and siblings. Much of the younger chimps' behavior is learned from the different individuals in their subgroups, and, like humans, chimps appear to have a special bond with their mothers and siblings. Now, as in the case of many social animals, the dominant males in both gorilla and chimpanzee groups are usually the biggest in size and brute strength. This is not to say that the dominant male will stay in power forever. Both gorillas and chimps can be, and often are, overthrown by others. Dominant male gorillas can be overthrown by a stronger, tougher gorilla, who will then take over the group. The displaced gorilla will then usually spend the rest of his life alone by himself. Then, what about chimps? Well, chimpanzees display similar dominance patterns, although displaced males are not always sent into isolation, like displaced gorilla males. There is one exception to this system of dominance that I feel is worth mentioning. Whereas gorillas rely on brute strength to gain the dominance of a group, it appears that chimps may also rely on intelligence to move up their group hierarchy. In a study conducted by primatologist Jane Goodall in 1964, a chimp named Mike was able to gain control of a group because he was smart. This chimp was not the usual candidate for a leader. He was one of the lowest in the dominance hierarchy and very weak physically. He was often attacked by chimps much bigger than him. But one day, Mike stumbled across a kerosene can lying around Goodall's camp. None of the other chimps had paid any attention to them, except for Mike. Grabbing one of the kerosene cans, Mike began charging the other males of the group and banging the can with his fists. All the other chimps were terrified of the loud noise, and Mike became the leader of the group without even fighting. He proved that chimps can use their intelligence and not just brute strength to gain power. So what do these differences in social structure tell us about these animals? Perhaps it demonstrates the slightly closer genetic relationship that chimps have with humans. Large communities, subgroups, gaining power through intelligence, are all unique characteristics that humans and chimpanzees share. Whatever the case, these slight differences in the social structure of gorillas and chimpanzees are fascinating topics for further study.
1. According to the professor, in which aspect do chimps and gorillas differ most? Two. What is a similarity that chimps and gorillas share? Three. What does the professor say that Mike used to gain dominance of the group? Seven. Office hours. Listen to a conversation between a student and a professor. Fill in the diagram with the information that you hear.
Hello, Professor Williams. Can I talk to you for a sec?
Of course, Anne. What can I do for you?
Well, you see, I've been having a lot of trouble with the tests for the class. I barely passed this last test, but I've been trying to study for them.
This class can be really hard, but the study guide should help. Did you use the study guide I provided to review the key concepts of this chapter?
Yes, I think that's part of the problem. The study guides don't seem to reflect what's on the test.
What do you mean?
I mean that I've been using the study guide. In fact, I practically memorized the information on the study guide, but then when I get to the test, I usually find a whole bunch of questions that were not on the study guide.
I'm still not sure that I understand. Would you happen to have a copy of the last test that we could go over?
Actually, I have a copy of the last test and a copy of the study guide. Let me just find them. Here they are.
Okay. Now let's look at a question that you missed. It looks like you missed question number 10 about off-price retailers. The question asked, what is an off-price retailer? The correct answer was C, a retailer that sells goods at prices 25% or more below traditional department store prices. You chose answer A, which states the definition of a discount store.
Actually, I just guessed on that one. I had no idea what the answer was. It wasn't in the study guide.
Okay, let's look at your study guide. The word retailing is listed right here, but I see that you didn't write much down.
Yeah, I just wrote down the definition. Wasn't that what I was supposed to do?
Yes, but you also should have written down the types of retailing, like, for instance, off-price retailers. I see that you've defined each term in the study guide, but you didn't go any deeper. You should also have written down the types of retailing and anything else that we discussed in class, or that was in your reading.
But it doesn't specify that in the study guide. It only has the word retailing.
Well, Anne, the exams test deeper knowledge than what's listed on the study guide. The study guides list the key topics, but it's up to you to explore these topics deeper. And there's one other major reason why I didn't list the different types of retailing on the study guide.
And what's that?
Conciseness. There are about 14 different types of retailing that exist, and there's no way I can list all of them on a single page.
Then how do I know what to look for?
We went through all the types of retailing in the lecture. Weren't you here then?
Yes, I was, and I took notes on it too.
Did you look over your notes for the test?
I glanced through them, but I relied mostly on what was on the study guide.
That's probably the problem. You depend more on your study guide than your notes. Anne, the study guide is just a guide. It's a rough outline of what will be on the test. It is not an in-depth list of everything you need to know to do well on the exam.
So how do I study for the test if I can't depend on the study guide?
You can still use the study guide. It lists the key terms and concepts you'll need to know. However, it's your job to explore and study these topics deeper.
How? I obviously can't study all the information in the reading. That's hundreds of items to memorize. How do I know what part of the reading is going to be on the test?
Do this by depending on your notes. Rather than just defining the terms in the study guide, take the concept listed and use that as a starting point. Then go through your notes and write down everything that we talked about in class concerning that concept.
Well, okay, but that's still an awful lot of stuff to study. We go over so much information in class.
It will get easier once you read through your notes a few times.
1. What is the student's problem? 2. What advice does the professor give to the student about studying for tests? 3. What does the professor say about study guides? 8. Service encounter. Listen to a conversation between a student and a university employee. Fill in the diagram with the information that you hear.
Excuse me, sir. Can I talk to you for a moment?
Absolutely. How can I help you?
Well, this is kind of embarrassing, but I'm having some problems with your weightlifting machine. I think I might have broken it.
Which one? We have 2 machines.
The one over there in the corner.
What happened? How did you break it?
I'm not really sure. I was lifting weights and everything was going fine. It was working properly, but then I don't really know what happened. It just stopped working right.
Can you be more specific?
There might be something wrong with the steel cable that connects the bar thing with the weights. You know how you pull the bar down and the cable lifts the weights up? 1 minute it was going fine. I pulled the bar down and the weight seemed to lift up fine. But the next time, well, I did yank the bar down really hard, but that shouldn't have caused it to break, right?
I don't think so. Still, you need to be careful with the equipment.
I was. I didn't yank it down that hard, but the second time the bar just came down easily. It wasn't pulling any weight, and I had that thing set at 20 pounds. I tried pulling it down again and again, but nothing. No resistance at all. The cable just doesn't seem to be connected to the weights anymore.
Sounds like the cable may have snapped.
Well, is there a place you can go to get it repaired?
Maybe. It depends on how damaged it is. I'd better go have a look.
Yeah, but before you do that, can I ask you how much this is going to cost?
Well, as I said before, it depends on how damaged it is. We'll probably have to have a repairman come and assess the cost. I'm guessing, what with the cost of the wire and the repairman's time, it'll cost at least $100.
$100? Just for a simple repair? What if you can't repair it?
I guess we'll have to look into getting a new machine.
And how much will that cost?
Well, it's a pretty valuable weightlifting machine. Better than the other one we have. But as a school, we'll probably get some kind of discount. I would say somewhere in the $1,200 range.
$1,200? If the entire machine is broken, I'm going to have to come up with $1,200 to replace it?
What? Of course not. Accidents happen. We expect that. That's why the school has insurance for the equipment. You won't have to pay the entire cost for a new one.
Oh, that's a relief.
However, you will have to pay a slight fee for repairs and damage.
How much?
$50.
That's still a lot, but it's much better than $1,200. Do you have a form I have to fill out or something?
Yes. Let me just get you one. Here it is. Now, this is what we use whenever a student happens to damage or lose part of our exercise equipment. You need to write your name, address, and a student ID number on the form. Then you fill out right here on this line which piece of equipment has been damaged and how. Now, you said the steel cord on the weightlifting machine snapped?
I think so. I didn't actually see the snapped cord, but it has to be that. I mean, why else won't it pull up the weights?
Well, we'd better go over and check. Let's see here. The cord looks fine.
You're right. I didn't actually stop to look at it before I came over to talk to you. Something else must have broken.
Ah, I think I found your problem. And the good news is, it's easily fixable.
It is? What was the problem?
Here, the pin that holds the weights together fell out. That's why you weren't pulling up any weight. The pin just needs to be reinserted.
This is so embarrassing. I can't believe I didn't stop to check if the pin was still in. I'm sorry that I wasted your time.
Not a problem. It's better than having a broken machine.
Thanks for all your help.
1. What is the student's problem initially? 2. What is required of students who break gym equipment? Choose 2 answers. 3. What is the cause of the problem with the machine? 9. Psychology. Listen to a lecture in a psychology class. Fill in the diagram with the information that you hear.
To continue our discussion on emotion, today we're going to go over the facial hypothesis. The facial feedback hypothesis. The facial feedback hypothesis suggests that our emotions are activated by our facial expressions. In other words, the type of face we make triggers what we feel. Everyone got that? According to the facial feedback hypothesis, our facial expressions create the emotions that we experience. Let me go a little deeper to show you what I mean. We all know that we make certain facial expressions when we experience an emotion. In a previous discussion, we talked about how these expressions are, for the most part, universal. For instance, when 2 people from opposite parts of the world experience a distressing situation, their eyes open wider, their eyebrows shoot up into their forehead area, and their lips may open partially. So, people everywhere exhibit similar facial expressions during similar emotional situations. But what do our facial expressions have to do with emotion? Well, our first inclination would be to assume that we make an appropriate face in response to an emotion. For example, we smile because we feel happy, and we frown because we feel sad. But the facial feedback hypothesis states that the facial expressions we make actually activate or cause the emotions we experience. We feel happy because we smile, not the other way around. The facial feedback hypothesis works like this. Say we're put in a situation that calls for a certain emotion. Perhaps we are in a situation that calls for an emotion of sadness. First, our brain registers the sad situation and sends out a signal. Now, according to the facial feedback hypothesis, this signal activates the part of our brain that controls facial movement. So all this happens in the brain, and only after we exhibit the appropriate facial movement do we feel the emotion. Let me take a little detour here to go over what I mean by facial movement. Okay, so we have 80 facial muscles that control our face, 36 of which control facial expressions. These muscles react to form different expressions. So, the next thing to happen in a sad situation is that our facial muscles respond to the brain signal by drawing the inner corners of our eyelids closer together and pulling our lips downward in a frown. But at this point, we still don't experience the emotion of sadness. Our faces react, but our emotions do not at this point. Finally, feedback from our faces reaches the appropriate program in the brain that controls our emotions. This feedback then activates that program and triggers the emotional response. Only now do we actually experience the emotion of sadness. If this theory is correct, then the facial expressions that we make are essential to how we experience emotion. So, theoretically, a person who lacked control of his facial muscles wouldn't experience any emotion, right? But how do we test the accuracy of this theory? Okay, right now, I want everyone to smile. Now, I want everyone to frown. Good. Our smiling should have caused us to experience the emotion of happiness, and our frowning should have caused us to feel sad. Did this happen? Did any one of you feel suddenly happy or sad based on the expression you made? Probably not. So, at first, the facial feedback hypothesis appears to be wrong. However, after numerous studies, researchers did find something interesting. They did not find that making a facial expression causes emotion, but they did find that feedback from our faces can either increase or suppress an emotion that a person is already experiencing. In other words, the facial expression exaggerates what you're already feeling. Say you're experiencing a joyful moment and you smile. The smile alone did not cause you to become happy. However, it can increase the intensity of your happiness to make you even more joyful. Or say you're in a difficult situation where you have to look happy. In this case, a smile probably won't turn your misery into happiness, but it may serve to alleviate your misery somewhat. The feedback from your face really can help, even if it's not in the way originally predicted. So, in conclusion, the facial feedback hypothesis is both correct and incorrect. While evidence has revealed that facial feedback does not cause emotion to occur, it has also proven that facial feedback does have at least a slight influence over the intensity of our emotions.
1. What does the facial feedback hypothesis suggest? 2. Which of the following happens after the brain registers a sad situation, according to the theory? 3. What can a smile do for someone in a sad situation, according to the professor? 10. Geography. Listen to a discussion in a geography class. Fill in the diagram with the information that you hear.
Today, we're going to start our unit on overpopulation by asking whether Thomas Malthus's theory on overpopulation was accurate or whether it was downright wrong. But first, who is Thomas Malthus and what is overpopulation? Thomas Malthus was a famous political economist of the 18th century. He believed that at the rate our world's population was growing, we would soon use up all our resources and reach a point where the earth would no longer be able to sustain us. This situation is called overpopulation. Now, when a country experiences overpopulation, it often faces a series of economic difficulties. For instance, India, which is predicted to surpass China's population in the next 50 years, has so many people that the country is facing poverty and is running out of land to put people. Thomas Malthus predicted these types of problems over 200 years ago and came up with his famous theory about overpopulation. Now, in his theory, Malthus said that the world's population was progressing at a geometric rate. This is when you have a series of numbers where each number is being multiplied by a particular amount to get the next number in the sequence. For example, think of the sequence 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. Each successive number in the sequence is multiplied by 2. That's kind of how our population works. On the other hand, Thomas Malthus thought that while our population was progressing geometrically, our food supply was progressing at only an arithmetic rate, when the same number is added to each successive number. Think of 1, 2, 3, or 2, 4, 6, 8. The same amount is being added to each number. So, if our population is growing geometrically and our food supply is growing at an arithmetic progression, what's going to happen?
There's not going to be enough food for everyone.
Right. Hence, we have overpopulation, a situation in which there is not enough resources to go around. Now, Malthus believed that the only way to stop overpopulation was through misery and death. He wrote in his essay that once the population exceeds the power of the earth to support it, then premature death must in some shape or other visit the human race. This death would most likely come through war, severe famine, or the spread of plague-like diseases.
But didn't he think that there could be other, less gruesome ways to deal with overpopulation? What about doing what China did by limiting the amount of children each couple could have?
He did propose the use of such techniques, mostly for the poor and the working classes. But overall, Malthus thought that the horrible outcomes of poverty and widespread death resulting from overpopulation were inevitable. Mankind would suffer until enough people died that the world could once again sustain the human population. Now, in reality, Malthus's beliefs were correct on certain levels. For instance, overpopulated countries do have lots of impoverished citizens, shortages of food, and other economic difficulties. However, many of Malthus's apocalyptic predictions did not come to pass. Can any of you think of an example?
Well, Malthus predicted that we'd have widespread famine and starvation across the world. That didn't happen. Even though there are famines in some parts of the world, Malthus's prediction was that we would see massive famines across the entire world. We don't see that happening.
Correct. In particular, Malthus believed that widespread famine would occur in Europe, which did not happen. Malthus also believed that social reform and higher wage increases wouldn't benefit society in the long run, because he felt that more prosperous families would have the means and the desire to have more children, thus increasing the population even more. Now, looking at current worldwide trends, this appears to be false, because our most economically wealthy countries like the United States, Japan, and the European continent are actually experiencing decreasing population rates. Yes, did you have a question?
Yes, I just wanted to point out that Malthus also didn't really take technology into account, right?
Yes, Malthus did not adequately consider what advances in technology could do for mankind. Advancements in technology and science have prevented Malthus's predicted catastrophes from taking place. In fact, experts from the UN Food and Agriculture Organization believe that with our current technology and production processes, our Earth can produce enough food to be able to sustain our current population of 6 billion people.
1. According to Malthus, what has to happen in order to put the population back into balance? 2. What did Malthus believe would happen with wealthier populations? 3. According to the passage, which of the following is correct about the world's population?